All right, are you aware that Masonicare in Wallingford has a whole hearing department where you can get your hearing checked that's open to the community at large?
I did not know that, but this is great for so many families, especially with holiday parties coming up. You know, this is something really great to do. So you actually don't even have to live there to get the services or be affiliated with them, right?
Absolutely. Nope, you don't. All you have to do is call and make an appointment just like I did. Take a look.
Do you hear what I hear? It's a classic holiday song, but what if you can't hear? That's a problem. And that's why I'm here at Masonicare in Wallingford to get my hearing checked.
Yes, that's me, looking like I'm waving to some friends across the hall. But in actuality, I'm getting my hearing checked.
All right, Scott, can you hear me?
Yep.
So you are going to hear some beeps starting with your right ear. Whenever you hear a beep, simply raise your hand. Most of the beeps will be rather soft.
I'm listening to directions from Dr. Hillary Lewis, a doctor of audiology at Masonicare's Hearing Center in Wallingford.
Now, you don't have to be a Masonicare member to come and use your facility.
Correct. We are here for the community at large. So you don't have to be in the continuum for Masonicare. You don't have to be a Mason. We welcome anyone age 18 or older to use our hearing services.
The last time I had a hearing test was elementary school. Is that typical?
That is very typical. Many people wait until they notice a problem before they get their hearing tested. Us as audiologists, hearing care professionals, we're always encouraging people to address their hearing sooner versus later.
And that's what this incredible hearing center is all about. Even if you don't think your hearing is compromised, you should get your hearing checked at least once a year.
I recommend annually. Annually is a good rule of thumb. So even if you haven't noticed a change in your hearing, get that baseline hearing test. We can monitor changes annually over time. So if we do notice a change in hearing, we can have an earlier intervention rather than waiting too long. As a general rule, we want people to get a baseline hearing starting as an adult. So a couple reasons. People think that hearing loss is unique to a certain demographic, meaning older people, like it's an inconsequential part of aging. But what we know is that hearing loss actually has a negative effect on other systems in our bodies. So their studies have shown in the last few years that hearing loss is a risk factor for cognitive decline. So if you have a hearing loss and you're not treating it, meaning you're not wearing hearing aids, that puts you at a greater risk for cognitive decline.
Cognitive decline?
Dementia. Dementia, yeah. So any sort of cognitive decline is a term that we use for any sort of dementia. Yeah.
Okay, and you're saying hearing loss could lead to dementia?
Correct. So it's one of the risk factors. It doesn't mean that if you have a hearing loss, you'll definitely have cognitive decline, but it puts you at a greater risk.
Okay.
How is hearing loss related to dementia?
So there's a couple working theories. One is your brain can only do so much. So if with hearing loss, you don't really hear with your ear, you hear with your brain. So if your ear's not picking up all the information, your brain has to work so much harder to figure out what's being said. And that comes at the detriment of your brain not doing other things it needs to do, like working memory. The second reason would be people with hearing loss are most socially isolated, and social isolation is shown to be a risk factor for dementia, so intertwined. And then thirdly, if you don't use it, you lose it. So you don't hear with your ear, you hear with your brain, and if you're not stimulating that auditory pathway, you have changes in your brain because of it.
Back to my hearing test. The results are in.
You know how you did?
I want to know how I did, how I do,
Good.
how I do.
A+.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's
so
awesome.
both ears look great. So well within normal limits across the board. And again, that's the raise your hand when you hear the beep part.
Yep.
The more interesting thing, I think, is the speech and noise test. It's one thing to hear, but how clear does it sound?
Sure.
Especially when we throw in some competing background noise with random oddball sentences. You scored great on that as well.
Oh, that's terrific.
Very, very good.
I'm glad to hear that.
I would recommend a follow-up in a year.
Okay.
Or sooner if you notice a problem.
You can see my chart. No dips in the action. All good. But take a look at another gentleman's chart. You see that big dip? Not good.
And this would be considered normal hearing. If it fell below, that's a degree of change. So for this individual, normal hearing through the low and mid pitches, but as the pitch increases, that's where we see a shift. What that means is, if we look at it in regard to speech, you're hearing certain parts of speech, just not all of them. So these consonant sounds are falling out of this gentleman's range, S, F, THs. Now you might not think that's a big deal, but those parts of speech carry a lot of information and make speech sound clear.
Sounds like he's a good candidate for a hearing aid, not the big old con you might think of. Hearing aids have come a long way.
So depending on the person, depending on their needs, we're going to make recommendations specific to them. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, it's not a cookie-cutter approach. What I might recommend for one person might be the polar opposite for somebody else.
Okay.
And it's funny, people didn't want to show their hearing aids off before. Now it's this cool, sleek part of tech. So this same case as my AirPods connects to my iPhone, connects to any sort of Bluetooth device, where if I'm listening to something, it will go directly from my device to my hearing aids.
Oh, that's great.
Big game changer during the pandemic. So when people were relying on their phones, FaceTime, things like that to connect with each other, the hearing aids allowed them to hear that conversation better.
Are they expensive?
I never minimize the upfront cost of a hearing aid, but things have changed. So 15 years ago, nobody had any coverage for hearing aids. But now it's pretty commonplace for people with Medicare Advantage, people who have secondary insurances with Medicare, or even, me who has Aetna, that there's some sort of coverage for hearing aids. So that was never happened before, but ubiquitous now.
Okay.
A lot of people say, I don't want to spend $5,000 on hearing aids, and my response is usually, good, you don't have to. They come in all different price points.
Yep. All right, if you'd like to learn more information on the Hearing Center at Masonicare, please head to their website. It's masonicare.org.